Mary Catherine Hamp, Brian Wilson, Brian Neiman, today's newsmakers, and you, the Morning Majority.
105.9 FM, WMAL. It is 7:07 on the Morning Majority. Wilson, Neiman, Ham, we're all here. We're joined on the phone by one of the nation's top pollsters, Scott Rasmussen. Scott, deconstruct the numbers in New Hampshire and answer this question for me. Is there a scenario under which Mitt Romney could be stopped?
Well, the results from New Hampshire were very good for Mitt Romney. I think one of the things that people have not focused on is just how large a share of the electorate were non-Republicans. Only 49% of people who voted in New Hampshire last night consider themselves Republicans. Among that group, Mitt Romney did even better, 49% of the vote for Romney among Republicans. Ron Paul came in second among that group, Rick Santorum third. Ron Paul and John Huntsman did very well among independents and Democrats who took part. And I think the other thing that was noteworthy last night is turnout was down a little bit. For a party that's supposed to be so fired up, this is the second event in a row where turnout's been down a little bit. Maybe the enthusiasm for the presidential field isn't quite there yet.
But on this question of, as we look forward to South Carolina, do you see in the numbers, in the trends, a scenario under which Mitt Romney might be stopped? Because, you know, there is this movement within some in the party who think that he's not the guy for them, and that's why they've been casting around for another candidate, another horse to ride.
Well, sure. As a matter of fact, in last night, about a third of the people said they were hoping more candidates would enter the race. Ron Paul and John Huntsman got sizable portions of their vote simply from people who were trying to say, we want somebody other than Mitt, and we would like another candidate to enter the race. Having said that, it'd take a Tim Tebow moment to see how Mitt Romney gets stopped right now. I think the bigger danger for Governor Romney is the way it's unfolding. It's hard to see why Gingrich or Santorum or Huntsman or Ron Paul would drop out anytime soon. As long as they can buy a plane ticket to the next debate, they have enough funding to keep going at some level. We could see a long slog where Mitt Romney is continuing to win a solid plurality. He is inching up on his delegate totals. But with so many other candidates in the field, he's still struggling to get to the 50% mark before the convention.
Obviously, social conservatives play a bigger role in Iowa than they do in New Hampshire, but Rick Santorum's number of about 9%, not all that great. Are you surprised that he wasn't able to jump on some of the momentum that he had from Iowa into New Hampshire, and does that really make a difference for him and for the base that he's really going after?
If you had asked me a week ago, I would have said I'd expect Rick Santorum to do better. Coming right out of Iowa, it looked like he was being talked up as the I'm not Mitt Romney candidate. Mm-hmm. But as the last couple of days unfolded, it became clearer and clearer he was not capitalizing on that to the degree some had expected. The polls showed that his growth was capped there. And just as important, John Huntsman, while he ended up a distant third, we saw that last-minute support breaking a lot in his direction, again, as an alternative candidate.
You mentioned if they can buy a ticket to the next debate, they might be all right, which may be more true this year because some of the polling has shown that debates have mattered a whole lot. Even though we want to think of this, a lot of people want to think of it as a message campaign, and we want to talk about the operation on the ground. The debates have mattered a lot. How have you seen that in polling?
The biggest thing that we saw was in New Hampshire, 68% of the voters had never met a single candidate. And that's unheard of. Retail politics, you're supposed to go out and hang out in the diners and meet everybody in New Hampshire. That doesn't happen. That didn't happen this time around. And a big part of the reason, I think, was the debate format really took hold. And we've seen that, Rick Perry had his campaign decimated by the debates. Newt Gingrich did very well for a long time in the debates. And I suspect the same will be true as we head into South Carolina. Now, you do have the super PAC factor, and Speaker Gingrich's, or not his super PAC, but the PAC advocating on his behalf, will spend an awful lot of money probably saying bad things about Mitt Romney. That will probably have an impact, just like the negative ads had an impact on Gingrich in Iowa. But ultimately, that debate performance gives somebody a platform and lets them continue.
Obviously, guys like Gingrich and Romney and Santorum, and when she was in the race, Michelle Bachmann, were taking votes away from each other. And everyone said, well, Romney doesn't really have anybody who he has to fight with, especially in Iowa. He didn't, because John Huntsman wasn't there. He did in this particular case in New Hampshire. I'm just wondering of how much, maybe the victory would have been even more so in New Hampshire had Huntsman not put a lot of time and energy into New Hampshire.
It's hard to say because half of Huntsman's support came from people who wanted new candidates in the race. So they weren't so much as saying, I'm for John Huntsman, as for saying, I'm not really sold on Mitt Romney. I'm not sold on this entire field. So I think they were just looking for a vehicle to express that displeasure. We've talked a lot in this campaign season about the number of late deciders. And those late deciders aren't really looking at the whole field trying to figure out who they're going to vote for. They've narrowed it down to one or two choices. And for a lot of folks, it seems to be the strategic choice of how best to express that. I'm not quite so comfortable with the front-runner status.
All right, so you got Romney, who has been, pretty consistent in his level of support. Then you got this host of nominees, the non-Romneys, who have come up and gone down.
Right.
But, look, polls are a snapshot, and it's always most important, many people say, to look at the trends. So as you look at the trends of the nominees, who's trending up and who's trending down at the moment?
Right now, Ron Paul is the one who is trending up, but the general expectation is that there's a real serious cap on his potential support, and none of the others are doing terribly well right now. I mean, John Huntsman did okay in New Hampshire, but not likely to do so well in South Carolina. Santorum and Gingrich clearly battling for that role of being the alternative. But when you look at the exit polls, who is seen as the true conservative, those people who are looking for a true conservative to vote for, well, they picked Ron Paul.
Well, we've been talking about for the past week some of this affiliation polling, and I know you track some of this. How big a deal is it that Republicans, who historically have not had an edge in affiliation, are looking up there?
Very significant. In the last several years, the party ID trends have been a good forerunner of what's going to happen in the fall. If you went back to 2008 during that incredible match between Clinton and Obama, the number of people identifying as Democrats grew dramatically and really gave us a good indication of what was going to happen. We saw the same thing in 2006 with the Democratic in the midterm elections, and then we saw it reversing as soon as the Democrats had control of the White House and Congress. The numbers began shifting in the Republican direction and moved very strongly that way. So I think in terms of the House and Senate, those trends are very important. I think there will be an awful lot of enthusiasm for Republican congressional candidates. A lot of the base who may be frustrated with the top of the ticket will still think it's important, perhaps even more important, to have a Congress they're comfortable with.
All right, Scott Rasmussen, always good to have you on. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Talk to you.